Have you ever played a game that didn't just scare you, it followed you? You turn it off, go make a coffee, and suddenly you're hearing footsteps in your hallway. These games don't just jump out at you, they get inside your head. Some players said they couldn't sleep for days. Others swore they saw things move in the dark after playing. These aren't random indie titles. We're talking about games that psychologists have actually analyzed for how they mess with your perception of reality. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to lose your mind from pixels on a screen, stay right here. Because we're diving into 17 psychological horror games that made players question what's real and what's just the game. First of all, we have No, I'm Not a Human, released in 2025 by Trioscaz and published by Critical Reflex. It is a first-person horror visual novel that traps you inside a diurnal lockdown while the world outside collapses under a solar catastrophe. It is not the usual jump-scare horror game. It feels more like being placed inside a moral experiment where daylight is safety and night turns people into something unfamiliar. Every evening, someone knocks on your door claiming to be human, and every time you talk to them, something feels wrong, like they are copying humanity from memory instead of actually living it. The game gradually teaches you how to separate real survivors from the hostile visitors. But the more you play, the less certain you become players. Compared it to This War of Mine and Papers, pleased not only because of the mechanics, but because of the heavy sense of responsibility that you never asked for. The real horror is not the creatures. It is the moment you realize you might kill a human simply because their emotions did not feel right. Psychologists call this empathy dissonance, when your brain cannot decide if something is human, and the panic sets in before the truth does. Next up, we've got Zort, a 2023 indie psychological horror that feels like your brain glitching in real time. You're trapped in endless office corridors where reality keeps rewriting itself, and every door you open leads somewhere it shouldn't. The game feeds on repetition and silence, slowly breaking your sense of space and time. Players said they started doubting their own memory after playing, wondering if that hallway was always there. It's built around spatial disorientation, a psychological trick where your brain loses its internal map. That confusion is pure, creeping panic disguised as gameplay. Coming up, we've got Escape the Backrooms, released in 2022 by Fancy Games. It drops you into an endless maze of yellow-tinted hallways that feel weirdly familiar but wrong. There's no music, no guidance, just fluorescent buzzing and your own footsteps echoing back at you. The real horror here isn't monsters, it's the liminality, that unsettling feeling of being trapped in a place that should exist but doesn't. Players said it made them feel physically sick or anxious after a while because your brain keeps trying and failing to recognize the space. That's called spatial dissonance, and it's psychological horror at its finest. Next on the list is Fears to Fathom, an episodic horror series that started in 2021 by Rail. Each episode tells a true story from ordinary people who claim to have lived through real-life nightmares, being home alone, stalked, or hunted by strangers. It's not monsters that get you, it's realism. Everything looks and feels too normal, which makes every knock at the door 10 times worse. Players said they caught themselves checking windows and locks after playing. It taps into hypervigilance, a psychological response where your brain stays in survival mode even after the threat is gone. And that's exactly what makes it unforgettable. Now we've got the Mortuary Assistant, released in 2022 by Darkstone Digital. You play as a woman working alone in a funeral home at night, tasked with preparing bodies until you realize one of them isn't resting peacefully. The brilliance of this game isn't just in the jump scares, it's in how it messes with your perception of routine. Everyday tasks like mixing chemicals and tagging corpses slowly turn into acts of horror. Players said they started hearing phantom whispers even after quitting. It taps into occupational dread, a real psychological response where repetition mixed with mortality triggers a deep subconscious fear of death and losing control. Next up is Pacify, released in 2019 by Sean Hitchcock, the same creator behind Emily Wants to Play. You and your team are sent to explore an old haunted mansion to calm the spirit of a possessed girl. It sounds simple until she switches from silent to screaming in half a second and sprints straight at you. What makes Pacify so disturbing isn't just her unpredictability, it's the tension between silence and chaos. Players reported physical stress reactions like sweaty palms and racing hearts every time the audio cut out. That's anticipatory anxiety at work, your brain fearing what's coming even when nothing's there yet. Now let's talk about Visage, released in 2020 by Sad Square Studio. It's a spiritual successor to the canceled PT, and it traps you inside a haunted house that never stops shifting. Lights flicker, hallways loop, and doors open to rooms that shouldn't exist. The game's genius lies in how it turns your own curiosity into fear. You want to explore, but every step feels wrong. Players said they felt watched even after shutting down the game. That's not coincidence. It's spatial disorientation, a psychological effect where your brain loses trust in its surroundings. And that's exactly what makes Visage unforgettable. Next, we've got The Exit 8, released in 2023 by Kotake Create. It's a minimalist Japanese horror experience that looks harmless until you realize you're trapped. You keep walking through the same underground tunnel over and over, searching for Exit 8, but something always feels slightly off. Maybe a poster changed, maybe your reflection blinked. It's the definition of liminal dread, fear born from the familiar turning alien. Players said it made them anxious in real life, like they were still looping after quitting. That's derealization, a real psychological response where your brain stops trusting reality, and this game captures it perfectly. Up next is Devour, released in 2021 by Straightback Games. You and your friends join a cult trying to stop a possessed leader from dragging you to hell. But every ritual and every scream gets more frantic as the entity hunts you down. The scariest part isn't the demon, it's the buildup. Those seconds of silence before chaos hits. Players often reported real physical reactions, like a faster heartbeat, shaky hands, and total panic. That's anticipatory fear, a psychological state where your body prepares for danger long before it happens. And Devour feeds on that exact instinct to keep you terrified. Next on the list is Phasmophobia, released in 2020 by Kinetic Games. It's a ghost hunting simulation where your microphone becomes part of the horror because the ghosts can actually hear you. You're not just exploring haunted houses, you're provoking real-time entities that react to your fear. What makes it so disturbing is how it turns your own voice into a trigger. Players reported whispering in real life after playing, just out of habit. It's built on behavioral feedback loops. Your fear makes you act nervous, which the game punishes, creating a cycle of genuine panic that feels all too real. Next, we've got The Classrooms, released in 2024 by Moonbit Studios. It's a found footage style horror game that feels like you've stepped into your own nightmare. You explore an abandoned school trapped inside endless looping hallways while being hunted by entities that barely make sense. The real terror comes from its randomness. Nothing repeats exactly, and that unpredictability messes with your memory. Players said they started hearing phantom footsteps even after logging off. It's a perfect example of procedural fear conditioning. Your brain tries to find patterns in chaos, fails, and starts panicking on its own. Up next, we have Mouthwashing, released in 2024 by Ken Forrest, is a short, surreal horror game that feels less like you're playing and more like you're dreaming something you shouldn't. You explore strange, looping apartments, filled with distorted faces and cryptic messages that never quite make sense. It's deeply uncomfortable, not because of what you see, but because your brain keeps trying to understand it and fails. Players described it as an anxiety attack turned into pixels. That's cognitive dissonance in action. When your mind can't reconcile what it's seeing, it creates fear out of confusion. Pure psychological disturbance. Next up, Outlast, released in 2013 by Red Barrels. You play as a journalist trapped inside a deranged asylum armed with nothing but a camcorder. The twist is that your only source of light is night vision, turning every shadow into a potential nightmare. It's pure psychological torture, because you're forced to look directly at what you fear most just to survive. Players reported real panic and claustrophobia, saying their hearts raced even after quitting. That's learned helplessness. When your brain realizes you have no control, It shifts from fight to freeze. And that's exactly what Outlast weaponizes. Then there's SOMA, released in 2015 by Frictional Games, the same minds behind Amnesia. You wake up in an underwater research facility where machines believe they're human, and maybe you are one too. There's no traditional combat, just the slow realization that your consciousness might not belong to your body. Players called it beautifully horrifying, not because of monsters, but because it forces you to question identity and existence. It's built on existential dread, a psychological fear that comes from realizing you might not be who you think you are. That's horror that lingers long after the credits roll. Up next, Who's at the Door, a short indie psychological horror released in 2023 by Coffin Studio. You play as someone home alone, hearing knocks at your door that never quite stop. But the real fear isn't who's knocking, it's whether anyone's really there at all. The game thrives on silence, timing, and that awful in-between moment when your mind fills in the blanks. Players said they found themselves listening for knocks in real life after playing. It taps straight into anticipatory paranoia, the brain's instinct to imagine threats it can't see, and that's what makes it feel so disturbingly real. Next, we've got Hello Neighbor, released in 2017 by Dynamic Pixels. At first glance, it looks like a cartoonish stealth game where you sneak into your neighbor's house to uncover what he's hiding in the basement. But underneath that playful art style lies pure unease. The AI learns from your behavior, adapting every time you try to outsmart it, which makes you feel constantly watched and second-guessed. Players described it as childhood curiosity turned nightmare. It's built on surveillance anxiety, that creeping psychological tension that comes from being observed when you think you're alone. And finally, Silent Hill 2, released in 2001 by Team Silent, the gold standard of psychological horror. You play as James Sunderland, who travels to the fog-covered town of Silent Hill after getting a letter from his wife, who's been dead for years. What unfolds isn't just a horror story, it's a descent into guilt, grief, and denial. Every monster is a reflection of James's own mind, and that realization hits harder than any jump scare. Players have called it emotionally devastating, not just terrifying. It's the perfect example of psychodynamic horror. Fear born from confronting your own suppressed emotions. So yeah, these 17 games didn't just make players scream. They made them think. Some ended when you quit, but others stayed. In your head, your dreams, your hallway shadows. Which one messed with you the most? Drop it in the comments, and if you love diving into the darkest corners of gaming, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around. Next time, we're exploring the games that broke players through pure loneliness.